Good afternoon. Welcome to the weekly edition of the Wrap. I'm Laura Leslie, WRAL Capitol Bureau Chief.
And I'm Travis Fain, WRAL State House reporter.
And gosh, what a week. It's maps, maps, maps all the way around this week. I'm sure if you've been paying any attention, you've heard plenty about it. We have lots and lots of coverage on our website. And we'll continue to, because today, of course, is the deadline that those maps had to be turned in to the 3-judge panel. And then I understand, Travis, you found out that the plaintiffs in the case are planning to file some maps as well, correct?
Yeah, there'll be something from the plaintiffs, at least some of them, most of them, maybe all of them. I don't know that they will all submit full-on maps, but there are still some concerns that a number of them have. Former Attorney General Eric Holder, who one of his redistricting groups is helping bankroll this case, the lawsuit that's ultimately thrown out the first version of the maps. He called them, the new maps, an abomination, the Senate and congressional ones. So obviously, there was real strong bipartisan support on the state House map. That seems, I don't know that it's done. There's still a VRA issue, a Voting Rights Act issue that some folks, Common Cause is gonna be interested in addressing that through the court. But other than that, I don't know of a ton of concern about that map. It's the Senate and congressional one that is going to generate something. And who knows? I mean, we got like a 13-judge panel now looking at this thing.
Right, because we have that three former judge panel advising the 3-judge panel, right? And that's Ross and Orr and Edmonds, correct?
That's right. Those are your special masters, plus they can bring in some technical assistance. So I don't know who all that'll be. And then you got the 3-judge panel of the lower court. And then, there are 7 judges on the Supreme Court. We kind of have a redistricting commission made up of current and former judges in this state. It's weird.
We do. I hadn't thought about that, but it's absolutely true. Anyway, so those maps going in today, the plaintiff maps going in today as well. What kind of struck you the most, I guess, about the way that the maps were redrawn?
That the House was able to find such an amicable, bipartisan, I think the vote was 115-5, deal on the House map, and that the Senate didn't at all, that it was, Republicans versus Democrats, which is no surprise. I guess the surprise was in the House, but it does show that, they can get together on some things. I know some people are concerned. They don't like what they got together on, but, it is 170 districts between the House and the Senate, and then add another 14 for Congress. That is a lot.
It is a lot in a couple of weeks too, and we had been told from the get-go from Berger and Blue that they were planning to work together in a bipartisan way in the Senate, but we learned that pretty quickly that had broken down. So the ones that we expected to be bipartisan were not, and the ones we didn't expect were. So you see how that goes.
And sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, I'll be interested if the congressional map stands. I think I've said for years that I'd be really interested to see how competitive districts would change our politics. Would it tune down the fringes? Would it, increase the influence of people in the middle? Would we get candidates? If you draw us together, people who disagree, do we find compromise? And we could find that out. There's 4 really competitive districts on this congressional map. But I mean, the other side of that is, at least the way they've done it, you're dividing some communities of interest.
Right, and some pretty prominent ones. I mean, most notably, the one that jumped out at us is the triad, because Forsyth would be in one district, and then Guilford would be split into 2 other districts. So 3 districts split for the triad. And then, of course, Fort Bragg, which we heard a lot about during the House floor debate over the congressional maps Thursday evening.
Yeah, Fort Bragg, I think, is a big one too. And it's hard to see, like, if you're a member of Congress, why wouldn't you do the best job you can for the military? It seems like you, regardless of whether it's a concentrated district or not. But I mean, people who support the base quite heavily are very concerned about that, including John Zoka, State Representative John Zoka, who was planning to run for that congressional district. He is kind of, if you want to do a winners and losers, he got hit pretty hard in this process, because the congressional seat that he was going to run in is, now David Rouser lives in it, current Congressman David Rouser. Rouser may or may not run in that district. We'll see. He could jump over to the 13th, back to where he used to live in Johnston County, because he lives down in Wilmington now. But so Zoka's plans are kind of thrown into the ringer there. Plus, his current House district, I think, is now a +3, +4 Democratic district. I saw him striding, I would say, into the speaker's office yesterday afternoon, as they were finishing the maps. He looked displeased, and I think they had a fairly intense meeting.
Yeah, and I on the House floor last night too. I mean, he certainly made his point that he did not support these maps. So interesting. So wait, so if Rouser might run on the 13th, and we already heard that as Brian Anderson reported for us, that Bo Hines is looking at the 13th, right?
Was he the 13th or the 6th? Y'all, I'm gonna go ahead and reveal what you may already know if you watched the wrap. I don't have a great mind for these maps. And
they've been renumbered so many times that seriously, it's like, okay, what number is the West now? What number is the East now? So yeah, I'm not sure. I do know that Wiley Nichols said that he was going to run the 13th too. So
Wiley Nickel representing Duplin and Sampson County. That sounds right.
Yeah, that'll work. No, you got to remember the bulk of the population in that district is going to be Southern Wake County and Joco. So, that is true, but that is a strange district, one of many strange districts in that map.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously, I cannot read the map maker's heart, but if you take them at their word, Senator Berger said several times, I've told folks to draw as many competitive districts as they can, and that you've got all these different factors you've got to weigh, but I mean, that is something people have been asking for, and now you got it.
Absolutely. In the meantime, so
before we move off of redistricting, I do want to mention the second 3-judge panel, the 3 special master panel. I think it's interesting that includes Bob Orr, the former state Supreme Court justice, who is also one of the attorneys seeking to have Madison Cawthorn kept off the ballot because of the insurrection, January 6th, let's just call it. And Cawthorn's role there. And it's interesting to me that they put Orr on this commission that's going to ultimately potentially help decide these districts when he's involved in that lawsuit. And I also want to note, I think it's interesting, if you've heard any Republicans justify the maps, particularly in the Senate, they will tell you how many of the districts that they drew Governor Roy Cooper won this last time out. That's something you hear over and over again to kind of justify, like, he won more than half, I think, of the districts in one of the maps. So thus it is a friendly map to Democrats. I think that's an interesting kind of backdoor acknowledgement by Republicans, because they picked that race to focus on, that Lieutenant Governor Dan Forest was not a great candidate for governor, because you're going to pick the example where Democrats did the best, right? Where they overperformed. And the fact that they're purposely coming back to Roy Cooper won this, I just think that's interesting.
It is, and I'm not really sure how great a signifier of Democratic strength that race is, because Cooper did get quite a few crossover votes, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, he did, and I mean, sitting governor in a pandemic, right?
Right.
When things were a lot more.
He was on TV like every day.
Yeah. So we'll see. The Republicans also have latched on to, if you read the opinion, I mean, it's 217 pages that throughout the old maps, but there's like 1 or 2 sentences where they basically say, if you score XYZ on a couple of measures, you're presumptively constitutional. And Republicans have really grabbed onto that.
Yeah.
Because I mean, you can judge it. It's a metric. You can do the math. And it will be really interesting to me to see if the court says, all right, yeah, you did what we said in these 2 sentences, so you're fine. Or, hey, those 2 sentences have to be read within the greater context of the opinion, and you missed some other things. So
that's what Dan Blue said yesterday on the Senate floor. He said, there's only so many times you're going to rearrange the deck chairs on the Titanic before you go down with the ship.
Yeah, I heard him say that at some point in the 40-minute or whatever speech it felt like that he gave.
Yeah. In the meantime, though, the Democrats too, I think, have really kind of glommed onto the statistics part of it, the REAC, the Pollsley-Popper, the efficiency gap, all those ways of kind of looking at whether or not a district is gerrymandered. And I guess in a big way, this is going to be a test to see whether or not those metrics really do assess the level of gerrymandering in a given map.
Yeah, and how much you can pick and choose from the buffet.
Yeah. So as you say, lots going on there. Of course, we're still wondering, well, where's Charles Graham going to run?
Yeah, I mean, all sorts of, and I spoke to Representative Graham this week, and he just said, look, man, I'm just going to wait, see how it all plays out, which is what I would recommend for everybody, but I know no one's going to do that. What is Tim Moore going to do? Is he going to jump back into the congressional race? I mean, the 14th looks like it was custom drawn for him once again. And would be much harder for a Madison Cawthorn to win. Dan Bishop.
It's more moderate. Yeah, it's kind of a swing district for sure.
Yeah, it was described at one point as the swingiest swing district on the map, and there are 4 very swing districts. Dan Bishop actually lives in that district, but we expect him to run in the 9th, which is right next door. So it's a mess, like the dominoes. I'm much more interested. If Moore gut jumps, I'm interested in what happens with the House caucus. I assume John Bell, the House Majority Leader, maybe Destin Hall, the House Rules Chairman, run.
Jason Saine.
Jason Saine has got to be in the conversation. There are a lot of people that could be in the conversation. Who
absolutely.
And then it just dominoes all the way down, right? So, and I mean, we're leaving out plenty of names that I'm sure. So if you didn't hear your name, I'm sorry. Call me. Tell me you're running for speaker.
Oh my gosh, you kill me. In the meantime, today was the first Medicaid meeting, the first joint legislative commission to study Medicaid expansion. And that was this morning. It was 3 hours of policy. It was something else. A lot of slides. I have PowerPoint poisoning. But one thing I thought was really interesting that came out of that meeting is that they had experts there from NCSL, which is the National Conference of State Legislatures, and they're nonpartisan researchers, right? They look at all 50 states. So they were talking a little bit about how expansion has worked in other states. I didn't realize this, but 30 states apparently just sort of took a blanket expansion, and about 8 states really sort of tailored it to have certain, like Arkansas and Indiana, to have certain requirements to it. But they actually spent quite a bit of time debunking some of the arguments that we've heard for years as reasons to not expand Medicaid. So it was interesting moment today.
Yeah, I think we'll see, but I think there are real prospects for this. Donnie Lambeth, who has been an advocate for some sort of expansion for years in the House Republican caucus, and is, he's a senior budget chair. He is a key part of the leadership over there.
But there were a lot of questions today about that and about the work requirement, which is something that Lambeth wants, right? But the experts said today, so far the Biden administration has pretty much rescinded all of those approvals for that particular requirement in different state programs.
Yeah. So the question then becomes, can you without those work requirements as part of it, which, let's be honest, there's always a little bit of window dressing. I mean, this program is geared for the working poor. That's the idea here. People who have a little bit of money, but not enough to be able to afford insurance on their own. Their job doesn't give them insurance. I mean, so the work requirement, I mean, it certainly made it more palatable, and I'm sure there are folks who would justify that. But is there another way to put it together? The concerns I hear now, of course, money, although that's helped by the feds dropping an extra 1.7, I think, minimum billion.
Yeah, that's a chunk of change. Yeah.
Because of the American Rescue Plan, one of the COVID stimulus bills that you get if you expand now. But also, we have shortages in so many places, including nursing these days, and in the medical sector in general. Concerns you're hearing now about, well, just because you get insurance doesn't mean you get care if you dump another 400,000 or whatever the number is people into the system.
And that was a big topic of debate today too. I mean, they talked a lot about nursing. Nursing was a big discussion that they had, but the shortage that they're talking about isn't even so much today. Of course, we do have a nursing shortage today, but down the road, about 10 years, 15 years from now, when a lot of these nurses are going to retire, and really some pretty dire modeling out of a UNC researcher over at the Shep Center. We could be down 33% on what we need for nurses, especially in things like hospitals and long-term care and extended care, especially, would have a huge shortage of. So they talked about the importance of sort of gearing up more of the community college, more regional schools, to nursing schools, to generate, to bring out more nurses that might stay in those rural regions where they're really needed, like out west, especially. So yeah, fascinating discussion, and one I think we're going to hear a lot more about, because as you say, I mean, if you expand, you got to have somewhere for these folks to go use that benefit.
And I mean, that's an issue regardless of Medicaid expansion, obviously,
Right. Well, it was a problem before COVID too, but now it's worse.
And as our economy continues to shift toward, there is always going to be a role for manufacturing, but personal services, particularly taking care of other people, that is a growth sector because of the way our population is aging. And because in part of our, continual movement toward embracing better mental health, I think as well. Not everybody can do that job though, Laura. Like not everybody is built to be a nurse in a nursing home.
Yeah.
And I don't know, you can put more money into it, you can pay better, you can have more training programs, but at some point you hit that line where we don't have any more people who are good at this. Because
well, at this point, I mean, I didn't realize this, but at this point, half of our nurse workforce, comes from outside the state.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, that's where we're at. So we're already there. We just don't have enough bodies. And I think you're right. Not everybody is cut out for this, but it's hard to say how different healthcare jobs may change over time, and there's also the question of different levels of healthcare jobs, right? Because there was a discussion today about LPNs who for a while sort of nobody was being an LPN because they were sort of being phased out, but now there's a huge need for them. So now they're having to gear up the programs to produce them again. Right. So, there's just a lot of layers to it that are really fascinating. And I'm sure we'll be talking a lot about in the next few years.
Speaking of layers, masks have layers, Laura. And
are we still talking about masks?
Have layered in politics into the governor said this week, hey, we're going to move away from these mask mandates, encourage. I mean, it was already a local decision. All the DHHS guidelines obviously play a major role in what locals decide, but he basically came out and said, hey, I think you should go to optional. This was at the same time, Republicans
in about 3 weeks. In about 3 weeks, though, he said.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Which I mean will probably coincide with the absolute bottom of the Omicron curve, right? Republicans have been pushing to end a little sooner, and they passed a bill yesterday that would move us toward that much. I guess more quickly. I guess I need to read the bill's fine print.
Well, the bill, I mean, we've been calling it a ban on school mask requirements, but really, I mean, schools can still require masks. The thing is that parents can simply opt out, and they don't have to have a doctor's excuse. They don't have to have any excuse at all. They can simply just opt their kids out. So, some people say, well, that's not getting rid of the requirement. I think, well, if it's a requirement that you can opt out of, then that's not a requirement. That's a recommendation, I would say.
Yeah. And I think, look, I don't have my finger, just because my kids are in school, on the pulse of school masking, but this is a much more mainstream opinion than it has been in the pandemic. The idea that it's time to go optional on masks. I went to a rally outside the Wake County School Board the other day. Good 150 people there, I would think. And what they were asking for was to make it optional. That's what I heard over and over again. Vote on it, make it optional. And Mark Walker was there, by the way, with his Senate bus. So I've now seen that in person. Check that off the list.
Well, we now have that bill that was passed in the middle of the redistricting. That was the mask bill that was passed yesterday. House and Senate both pushed it on through. It is now on Cooper's desk. The question is what happens to it? And then what the ramifications are for that, because it did pass. It did get a couple of Democratic votes.
I think 7 Democrats voted for it in the House. I don't know what the count was in the Senate. Do they come home if he vetoes? That typically has been the case. And I'm sure if he does veto, the argument will be, well, we've handled this. Like we don't tie our hands going forward, but we're already moving to the exact same place. There's no need for this bill that might hamstring us if the numbers just skyrocket.
But I'm just trying to imagine the caucus discussions about who gets to be allowed to vote to keep the mask optional, versus who's going to have to vote to uphold the governor's veto.
It's a tough issue for Democrats.
That's it. I mean, that you can just the mailers write themselves.
They do. This. They do. And education is going to be so big this cycle, particularly with what happened in Virginia. where, Democrats just kind of got crushed. And part of it was because Terry McAuliffe said something along the lines of, well, the schools, the parents don't need to have as much say in what their children learn. You can't, you don't want to get into a situation where you're arguing that during an election. I promise you, it is not going to work out well.
Yeah. So it's just, a lot of Democrats think, and perhaps rightly, that the reason this bill was run was for political reasons. Simply to put Democrats on the spot, to get them on the record, so there's something to beat them over the head with in November.
And look, there's no doubt. I mean, Tim Moore knows a little bit about what the governor and DHHS are doing. He knows what was coming down the pike. So you get out in front of it a little bit, and smart politics.
Anything else we didn't touch on for this week?
No, I think that's plenty. That's plenty. I'm sure still be talking about maps next week.
Probably so. Anyway, and do, if you haven't visited NC Capitol lately, go have a look. There's tons and tons of content on there about redistricting and about the maps, and about a lot of other stuff as well. Lots of good reads there.
All right. Everybody have a good week. Laura's off next week. She's going to be away from us.
I am. I will be off, and I'd like to say I'll miss you, but well, let's pretend that. Okay.